Hey, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Jonlyn Wong. I work at M&B, and thank you to Angela and to William both. We're really excited for this talk. You'll notice there are a few different Angelas on our panel today. I'm going to request that the various Angelas, except for Angelo Dufresne, remain muted for this talk. So thank you so much, you guys, for joining us today. As you guys know, Angelo Dufresne has a show up at M&B right now. It is an brilliant show, and it was really created in this collaborative process with William E. Jones, and they're both here today to talk about how they met and how they started working on these paintings together, in a sense. So I'll throw it over to you two to begin. How do you two meet? At Skowhegan, right?
Yeah. So yeah. Again, everyone, the multiple Angelas, of course, that would make sense that it would be me. And in truth, I think thematically it makes sense in this kind of porous banter that these paintings came out of. I will say that it's not over. In fact, after we did a kind of dry run, although there is no such thing as a dry run, I think, with William and I. Oops, sorry. There was talk of more paintings. So this is like an ongoing part of like our friendship, and also just like a way that my friendship with William has altered and expanded, like the way I think about my paintings and the way I think about like my identity or whatever, my authorship as the person who authors these paintings. But yeah, William, did you want to maybe jump in and talk about those early findings of ours, like our discovery of Bill Nelson and the fall and all that in the studio?
Yeah, I mean, we both taught at Skowhegan in the summer of 2017. So this is a friendship of recent vintage. We're not school friends or anything like that. And I walked into her studio and had I might be able to describe as an anxiety attack. And it's been pretty much consistent ever since. The Angelo Dufresne effect, as I call it, is it's impossible to determine whether you're having an anxiety attack or you're having fun. But she was working on some giant painting, I don't remember which, and almost immediately she asked to paint my portrait. And no one had ever painted my portrait before. So I said, sure, why not? And that was the beginning of about 20 hours of sittings. And the result was a painting that I thought was really amazing. And I mean, being the subject, I'm a bit partial, but I thought it was a breakthrough for her as well. It was very closely observed. And from the beginning, I was bossy. I was, saying, well, maybe my beard should be a bit more like this, or I think you've got to do something to the eye. And, that became this whole relationship where I'm kind of bossing Angela around, at least with regard to iconography. But it's a running commentary between us on what's going on. And like whenever I visit a museum, I text her all these pictures of what I'm looking at, and she does pretty much the same for me. So it's this dialogue that's partly enacted through an exchange of images.
Yeah, I wanted to say that just in terms of like why too, that it seemed like I had basically started thinking about like wanting to have an exhibition in Los Angeles, and there was no way that I was going to do an exhibition in Los Angeles of just like the work that I produce. Just, I mean, not that there's a gist about that, but just like my body of work as a kind of like, here's your LA's little piece of Angelo. This is such a huge part of what I'm reading, like the films I'm thinking about. So the reason I'm wearing this, here, let me show my tits in the camera. I'm wearing this the skeletal Sicilian flag T-shirt that I bought on a trip that we made just before the pandemic started. And literally, and I think we could almost tie this into the next bit of conversation, like maybe about Roger or something, King Roger. But like everywhere I would go, I'd be sending William pictures, and it became this idea that like I would never make an exhibition in LA that wasn't going to be about this deep and like utterly inspiring and meaningful friendship to me. And also, I mean, I just want to say that it aside from all of that, it really became like me kind of acting out these titles. I'd asked William to send me 10 titles initially. Of course, he sent me like 15, and because he's bossy, and it was great. And then I became, you know, I sort of like it was like being handed this puppy with like, I don't know, spooge all over it. It was like completely this like unwieldy thing, and like each title would be like Stalin's vagina, like what? Like, and then it would require like you know, like Skype calls or whatever, Zoom calls or FaceTime calls, and then multiple notes and research on my end, and also like getting to know him. I know more about Stalin now than I ever would have known, although I did know who Stalin is. You have the poetry book nearby? Yes.
So yeah, this was a gift from a friend who visited Stalin's birthplace in Georgia and brought this back for me. But yeah, I before I embarked on the trilogy of novels I'm working on right now, I had this kooky idea to write a kind of fantasy novel called Stalin's Vagina. And it was to be about Stalin as a kind of sibyl or an oracle who's squatting over a volcanic vent, and the fumes are giving him the vapors. And he's not actually a him. He's a hermaphrodite, and this is a secret that has to be closely guarded. And it was my fantasy idea that this is why so many people were executed in the purges, because they suspected that he was this quasi-divine being, which is just, I mean, it's just preposterous. I never ended up writing it, but I thought, what a great title. So now we have Stalin's Vagina as a painting, which is probably as it is best seen. Yeah, there it is.
Oh, I don't know why the Zoom is being so insane, but here's
Can
the
you click on
resulting.
God? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's really infuriating.
And the other thing about Stalin is that when he was young, he was a total babe. And only later did he appear to be the absolute monster that he became.
Well, all throughout the book, the trilogy of novels that you're about ready to publish, the second one, there is this crazy tension. I don't know what, like this obscene highlighting of whatever the capitalist reality that you live in, and this like kind of grappling with trying to understand the history of socialism in the book. I don't even know where to begin. I've been, you know, I think across the board, you know, a sort of lower middle class, you know, aspiring bourgeois in America until my sort of, you know, until, you know, arriving in an undergraduate school and realizing that none of these systems work for me. And so I remember yesterday or the day before you talking about how many young people, you know, having us being raised in the Cold War era, like don't even know anything about Stalin. All they know about is like the rhetoric of maybe some lunatic from the Republican Party talking about socialism and having no idea what that means. And so I was kind of like wondering if I would love to hear you like talk about like the role that plays in your book. But before I do that, I wanted to say that like the performative aspect of me kind of using my body as like the projector of William's ideas is a play with like commission, or the idea of like an authority figure trying to, use an artist to distribute hegemonic propaganda or just bullshit, right? And so this is the antithesis of that, and we're both very aware of that, which is where the game gets really slimy and fun.
I have a quick
But anyway,
question.
okay.
If I could approach Angela's statement first, because this may be the only artist talk ever in history that started with an image of Stalin's vagina. I work on a trilogy of novels. The first has been published. It's called I'm Open to Anything. And it is set between 1980 something and 1992 in Los Angeles. And then the second novel is about to be published, and it's called I Should Have Known Better. And in that, the narrator goes to art school, and the narrator actually meets an artist who resembles Angelo Dufresne, and her character name is Frances. But the second novel is set between 1994 and 1998, roughly. So they're in art school at the end of the 90s. And one of the things I think is very important to approach in writing historically about the 90s is that people were reckoning with the ending of socialism as a state system in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And there were people who were doing their triumphal dances and thought that it was the end of history. That's something that I think has fallen away as a way of thinking about the era. But, anybody who considered himself or herself a leftist had to grapple with the fact that as a system, socialism in the East did not work. And, how do we reinvent things? How do we understand what went wrong and how it went wrong? And so this is a kind of, long-term project for a lot of people. For younger people, I think it's not really a question because they don't remember this history. But for those of us who grew up during the Cold War, it was really something. I mean, there was the capitalist world that we belonged to, and then there was this immense blank spot in the East that had, we knew nothing about it. How did people live there? It could have been Mars. And so that, inspired a lot of curiosity in me. And I'd have no illusions that this was some kind of paradise for sure. I'm not one of those apologists. On the other hand, I do maintain that what happened between about 1989 and 1991 was the last world-shaking political event of our lifetimes. It was the thing that we are still reckoning with. We're still trying to understand a world. It used to be communism versus capitalism, and now there's only capitalism. And what remains to us in our imaginations in that reality? And I actually believe that because there's no great adversary of that ideological kind, that there's something missing in our lives. There's no longer anything for people to believe in but money. Now, of course, things have changed somewhat because we have a great Satan that we fight from time to time and are still fighting in the form of Islamist politics in the Near East. But I think that's a different battle, and it's a different range of rhetorics that are put into play. And perhaps it doesn't have quite as much purchase on the imagination as the concept of a socialist utopia, which is, it's an utter failure, but at the same time, it's enormously powerful in people's minds. Now, you were going to say something, John Lynn. What were you going to say?
I completely lost.
I am so sorry.
I feel like we could segue into like a musical reference, because I remember in the early 80s that amazing song by what's the band called? Jeff. It's the I'm flying over Russia, flying over Russian soil. I'm flying over Russia. And she talks about like they like something like they, like we're told that they they can't do what they want, but neither can we. It's this like beautiful early like new wave. It's the woman who. Oh my God, I forgot everything. Do you know that
Yeah,
song? Does anybody know
here
that
we
song?
come. Here we come to a major part of our relationship, which is that it is my function when we are together to finish Angela's sentences.
Well, I was going to say that so much of the show is like, well, the two of you seem to have such like really far, like sprawling in artistic interests coming from music and cinema and theory and art history. And much of the show is derived from like the fall and lyrics. And so were those were some like key prompts, William, that you gave to Angela, you threw to
Yeah, I
her?
mean, one of the first things I discovered about Angela is she's a fan of the fall. And most of my friends are fans of the fall. And if I don't know, look it up. If you don't get the reference, just look it up and you won't regret it. But very few of the fall fans are female, as it happens. And Angela, as a female fall fan, immediately, that caught my interest because she understands what it is as music and she's interested in it lyrically as well. Marky Smith, the main member of the fall, I mean, Marky Smith once said, the fall can be anything. If it's your granny on the kazoo and Marky Smith, it's the fall. So the only member of the fall that was in the band for the entire length of its existence was Marky Smith, who's a lyricist of tremendous power. And he, I think, was wrestling with the tradition of English modernism. His great inspiration was Wyndham Lewis, who was arguably the great British modernist writer. He was also a fascist, and Frederick Jameson wrote a famous essay about him called Fables of Aggression. And so he's a very complicated character and one that's not easily assimilated into a nice humanist model of literature. But Marky Smith is taking the dynamism of this modernist prose. And that's the thing about Wyndham Lewis. It's in many ways reprehensible as artistic work, but the prose just crackles with energy. It's brilliantly, beautifully written. And that's the case with Marky Smith. He's coining these phrases that seem to come from some other region of the brain than we use when we converse. And he comes up with these amazing phrases, like Jesus Christ in reverse, which is from Tempo House, which is one of the paintings in the show. And yeah, but where's Tempo House? There it is. And there's actually a little text in it that says Tempo House. But it's a truly amazing lyrical thing that he did in his songs. And so many of the prompts actually came from Marky Smith's lyrics for the fall.
And I want to qualify that I think I could listen to nothing but the fall. I mean, this is kind of the beauty and also the disgustingness about digital music, that you can hoard it in such a careless, thoughtfulness way. That I have about 3 solid weeks of fall albums from all of the obscure live, recordings and live recordings and recordings in the studio and unreleased and B-sides and you name it. And my dear friend Jeff Chadsey, but also my beloved Lizzie Bonaventura was a crazy fall fan and saw them back in the day and saw the Raincoats, which there's a piece in the show at Yossi's named after a Raincoat song. And they're all sort of pinnacle to I love what you said about crackle, William, that there's a kind of language that crackles across the page. And in some way, I'm trying to establish almost like a synthetic cubist crackle across the field of these paintings that's sort of like charged with that energy and has that rhythm. I would say it's a punk rock, but I would also say, and I think this is something where we could go into maybe Roger, King Roger, but still has a kind of language elegance and beauty that even some of the most beautiful opera has, right? And we also bonded almost instantly on Maria Callas. I mean, if you're a gay out there in the world and you don't love Maria Callas, then go to your therapist fast and hard. But that's not too prescriptive. I'm not trying to tell you what to do with your life. But anyway, and that and
Oh, and
that,
by the way, and in parentheses, King Roger is an opera. It's an opera by a Polish composer named Szymanowski, and it was performed in Paris at the Opera of the Bastille, and it was also performed at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden, and it did performances in Spain as well. I don't know how much it's been performed in the United States, but it is the great opera in Polish, and it's also the great modern opera in Polish. It's from 1926, and it's by Szymanowski, who was queer, and his librettist was also queer. And it's this very peculiar amalgam of Euripides as an inspiration, but also King Roger of Sicily in the Middle Ages, but also the predicament of being queer in early 20th century Poland. And they're all in there. And the music is really sensual. It's like late impressionist music. It's a little bit like Debussy, but it also looks forward to Gorecki, whose Third Symphony is enormously popular and famous in the United States. And yet this was written 50 years before Gorecki's Third Symphony. So it's a fascinating piece of music, very, very beautiful, with very peculiar libretto that is difficult to translate. And it also has lent itself to some very strange productions, which are really fun to watch. And one of them's on YouTube. The one from Paris is on YouTube, and you can see it. I mean, it starts out with a giant projection of Joe D'Alessandro naked and some little baby in the background. I mean, it's just this crazy, crazy pastiche. But this collision of all this stuff is part of what generates work for Angela. You know, what happens if we impose this upon that, and what comes out?
Well, can we actually, Angela, can you talk about this Tempo House painting? Because there's so
Yeah,
many different layers there.
and it would be a good one to talk about, because I didn't, I think William had sent that title and said, you know, this is going to be one of the fall ones. And then I sort of looked at it again and started making drawings. And so this is very much like especially ones that are maybe more narrative, like this one, as I took it to be. I started making drawings and think about it, and I was trying to weave things I was interested in. So I was like deep into like lectures and research, and like Silvia Federici's book on witchcraft, Caliban and the Witch, and was really, because and I think we could really maybe try to talk about this, although it's impossible to address the whole thing, but like there is, of course, throughout, you know, queer communities, this kinship, this allegiancy to the persecution of witches, and just in general other belief systems in early modernism, and actually even in like the early kind of imperial periods, and even in Greece, that this thing where the sexually abnormal people start to be marginalized as society evolves. And I think I was just thinking of Arthur Evans's the gay counterculture, Witchcraft and the Gay Counterculture book, which is not the best in the pile, but interesting nonetheless. And so I was hearing Jesus Christ in reverse. Initially, I was just taking it as a linguistic prompt, as a language prompt, as like a line separated from Marky Smith and from the song, and thinking about all of that reading and meanderings I was doing that were not really meandering. They were very directed. And so I was thinking like, how was I going to get some of these witch motifs into that? Because of course, the witch, even if you're in a whether you're in a Mary Magdalene cult or a Virgin of Mary cult, it is counter to Christ being the center of any kind of an understanding of what it means to be a Christian. So basically, if you have a pussy, you are Jesus Christ in rebirth. And if you have, so this is the way I'm interpreting this. And it's funny because I've actually never told William like how the fuck did I come up with this composition, but this is how. And so I wanted a kind of this is a playing. This is the very bottom of this painting is kind of a witch cannibalist scene, based on an old woodcut engraving print from like the 11th century. I actually don't know the specific reference because I just don't, right? It's off the top of my head right now.
Well, in parentheses, let me also say that one of the common accusations against heretics was that they engaged in cannibalism. And for instance, they ate their own babies, or they ate the babies of opponents. And this is something people say about their enemies on a regular basis. And perhaps QAnon is coming up with something right now. But this cannibalism motif is something that's very old and consistent, and is usually imputed to witches and to theological opponents.
Yep. And so I wanted that sort of like the female witches to be in the front, and then behind them I gave space, and also this woman on the tightrope, which is actually based on a figure that I painted in an earlier painting about 10, I don't know, it was like 8 years ago or something like that. And it's a portrait of Elizabeth Bonaventura's, my long-term partner, her mother walking on a tightrope. And it was basically like whatever, it's a family with 8 children. So, I mean, it's not a stretch to think about that life as that. But, and to a certain extent, she is the perfect, example of a really upstanding, kind of beautiful, liberal Catholic human who I love. She's 93 years old. She lives in Florida. And it's epic what that woman was able to accomplish with every one of those kids. So anyway, aside from that, the rest of the characters actually come out of the lyrics of the song. So as I started listening, so basically as I started, and I had the drawing, and I had made another drawing that was a kind of a reference to a Bruegel painting I'd seen. Where the hell was I? I think it was at the Morgan Library, and which was beautiful. And I was just like, it's this Christ in a crowd thing. And I was like, oh yeah, I could use that crowd field to start to kind of highlight some of the lyrical moments of Mark Smith. And so you can see throughout there like these moments. Like this is a Liz Taylor. This is a very famous promotional photo from
Suddenly Last Summer.
Yes. Why was I having a hard? It's actually not Suddenly Last Summer. It's the other one with Montgomery. It's A Place in the Sun.
Oh, A Place in the Sun. Sorry.
Yeah, I with Monty. It's also with Monty, but an ever so slightly different diabolical plot.
Yeah, I mean, they're both diabolical films. That's a very good word for that. I mean, they come from a moment when, for instance, Montgomery Clift couldn't be the homosexual that he really was in his fantasy life, and they're full of a kind of torment under the surface, which fortunately we don't have to entertain anymore, do we, Angela?
Except when you try to post a picture of William with some nude boys in his hands on Instagram, and your post gets deleted as though that has anything to do with us being able to express our sexual desires.
Let's take a look at that painting, actually.
Yeah, this is the von Loden photograph that I was showing, and which was posted on Instagram and taken down almost immediately.
Yeah, this was earlier today.
Yeah,
we can get to that photo. But yeah, so then there's a bunch of references in Temple House to the song, and there's a bunch of Sikh soldiers. He talked a lot about the British exploratory service and forces, and of course we know that they basically strong-armed people from South Asia to serve in those armies, both in World War I and World War II. And that's a shit show, but I don't need to say that.
I wanted to just touch on Jenna Rollins as a muse, and how actually, can you bring up the Jenna as rifleman? from the rifle.
Oh yeah, the
That big
Jenna,
one.
Jenna Rifle one. That's a very important painting because it combines two figures who were very important in Angela's life. Don Clements, the artist, who
Mhm.
gave her the still from the Rifleman, and then me, who gave her the prompt via my novel. So both of us are in this image, this painting, which I'm very happy about because I never met Don.
I
So
wish that you all had met.
what's the context, William, for this painting in the novel?
Well, I can do a little reading if you wish.
Yay!
The
I think
novel
that's
is
the perfect
called
time.
I Should Have Known Better, and the narrator meets a character named Francis, who's based on Angela, on the first day, and wanders into her studio. On the first day of classes, I went wandering around campus and ended up at the studios again. Most of them were empty, but one showed signs of life. I heard music blaring through the door. I could make out the lyrics. I am Damo Suzuki. I approached to listen more closely. I knocked when the song was over. The occupant of the studio came to the door and asked, "Too loud?" "It's the fall, not loud enough." She motioned for me to come in, and while she turned down the music, I took a good look at the place. The studio was much taller than it was wide, and a skylight in the roof illuminated the space. A large expanse of canvas, sorry. You're from Kansas. A large expanse of canvas took up the wall opposite from the door, from end to end. It was shaping up to be a painting of a woman's head. The other uninterrupted walls were full of smaller paintings and drawings and various accidental marks. The wall behind me as I entered had a small window, and under there was a table strewn with a huge pile of papers and mixed in audio cassettes and a tape player splattered with paint. There was a high table in the center of the room, positioned near the painting in progress. It served as a large palette with an array of colors spread around a glass surface. The occupant of the studio didn't seem to mind me staring. She had an appearance I could only describe as happily disheveled, a plaid skirt and a loose-fitting pair of khaki pants covered in daubs of paint. She had a pleasant, open face, almost childlike, crowned by a mass of beautifully unkempt brown hair. Her eyes pointed in slightly different directions, which had the unnerving effect of making it difficult to determine if she was actually looking at me. She broke the silence by speaking first. "You must be new here. I'm Francis." I introduced myself and asked how long she'd been in the space, which looked well used. "I got it in spring semester. The previous occupant cracked up and I got to move in from the annex here. I won't be in the studio lottery. How could I do better?" I looked over at the painting, which was a mass of washes and loose brushstrokes, and asked, "Is that Jenna Rowlands?" "Yes," Francis said, and came over to hug me. "You're the first person to recognize her." It was difficult to make out a specific face from the riot of color, but the red lips and blonde hair were giveaways. The painting belonged in a much larger space. I asked, "How do you get a good look at it in your studio?" She said, "I open the door wide and lurk around the courtyard. I look like a sex pervert, but that's just an added benefit." I said, "I don't recognize the film this comes from." She said, "That's because it's from television, The Rifleman." "Ah, so the color choices are your own. The show is in black and white, as I remember it." She said, as she became animated, "When I imagine Jenna's face, I always see her in color. She's a goddess." And then I say, "I bet you were crushed to find out the Tarnished Angels is in black and white." She let out a whoop of delight. "Oh my God, you're right. But in my mind, Dorothy Malone is always in color too." Well, at least we have Written on the Wind. I walked over to the table and picked up a drawing that resembled a scene from Marnie, but with a difference. Tippi Hedren, arms full of loot from the safe she has just robbed, was bent over a desk getting her ass eaten by the boss's secretary, an improvement on the Hitchcock film. Noticing which drawing I was looking at, she said, "Oh, Tippi, she was so sexy, but such a strange actress." Wondering if her interest extended only to blondes, I asked, "Anna Magnani?" "I'm weak in the knees thinking about her, darling." She elaborated. "Great actresses do what great painters do. They make a gazillion decisions per second and then figure out a way to project them either through the lens or through a frame, you know? It's so crazy the amount of stuff that gets packed into every movement. So that's a segment of the novel that Angela can relate to.
And that, I mean, we literally had that conversation. I think because with the first Jenna painting of mine that you saw was, sorry, there's somebody drilling in this building. I hope that's not too disruptive. Was the Gloria one where she's standing next to the cab and there's and she has the pistol and there had been many people had gone through the studio before then and no one had recognized it. I have many friends who instantly did, but I had been. It felt as though, besides my friend Dawn Clements, who was perpetually sending me images of, I mean, not of the kind of great actresses, definitely of the 70s when there was a movement to really tell a kind of story. And I wanted to have William elaborate on this a little bit, like the kind of ruthless, almost, I think you used the word unsentimental aspect of dealing with the crises of class and of femininity and womanness that those actresses deployed, and that's, I wouldn't say just male directors. I think you know, Delphine Seyrig working with Ulrike Oettinger. I think even some Ida Lupino movies from the 50s pulled that off too, but that's another discussion. But these actresses told a story about what it was like to be a woman in this American capitalist fantasy that was so ruthlessly painful and isolating. And you know, this is the line, if you listen to any interviews that happened with Jenna Rollins, she'll always cite this thing that Cassavetes said to her, and I saw her present him this way. I saw him present these scripts this way, in the sense that he truly believed that society existed to drive women crazy. Like, that's a quote. And so all of these great actresses at that point, there was no like refabricated like happy ending of being a woman in the world. They were all, but they were different in the sense they weren't also these like epically tragic, like the women dies, like a Lars von Trier movie or something like that. There was something in between that these films were doing, that when Fassbinder uses Hana Shigula, or when Cassavetes collaborates with Jenna Rollins. But Jenna Williams said something that was really amazing when we were talking the other day about Jenna being unsentimental versus Cassavetes' sentiment. And it came up because I was saying, you're sort of like my Cassavetes and I'm your Jenna, in the sense I'm taking your language and projecting it onto the canvas as though it's a screen, like my body. Now, I don't even want to know if I'm too sentimental, but I really loved what you said about Jenna and why she's so great, because it also describes why why she is my ultimate. She's my favorite artist of all time. I mean, I say that across realms of filmmaking and painting and sculpture. I just think that she does something with her body that is, and her intellect in those performances, that is so utterly prescient and potent and powerful, and speaks to a kind of experience, American experience, that nobody else has come close to articulating. But anyway, William, maybe.
Now, Angela, you said it all. I have nothing to add. But you know, I'll say something somewhat controversial, which is that I think Jenna Rollins was a greater artist than Cassavetes. John Cassavetes is really worshipped as the great American independent filmmaker. And he made a whole bunch of films, many of them with Jenna Rollins as the star. But for me, his films are compromised a bit by his sentimentality. And one of the amazing things about Jenna Rollins is that she has direct access to all kinds of emotions, as an actor must. and yet she's unsentimental. There's nothing soft about her performances. They're very, they're not rigid, but there's something hard about them. But I think that's actually a virtue. I mean, she's a very, very tough person who at the same time has this incredible access to emotions. And for me, that's completely fascinating. It's the gift that keeps on giving. You can watch her films over and over, and they're wonderful. And if I can just add one more thing, there's another figure you forgot to mention who I think is incredibly important, Barbara Loden, who was known at one time as Elia Kazan's wife or lover. But Elia Kazan is no longer what he used to be. No one really cares that much about him anymore. But Barbara Loden made one feature film as a director. It was called Wanda. And if you don't know it, look it up immediately. It's on the Criterion collection. And it may be available on DVD as well, but Wanda is a masterpiece. She only was able to direct one feature, and she starred in it. And it is really something special. And I think it embodies a lot of the things you were talking about with regard to actors in the 70s and their way of representing the predicament of women and how to get through that. Really, Wanda's a masterpiece.
Angela, do you want to pull up the Neon Bible? Sprawling one, because you can kind of see Gina as like a heroic figure, and it's really cinematic.
Oh, look at that. So Angela wasn't aware of the film The Neon Bible, and it's a film by Terence Davies, and it's based upon a novel by John Kennedy Toole. Toole is famous for writing Confederacy of Dunces, which was a very popular novel in the United States, published posthumously because he killed himself. He was so upset about the rejection of his novel by various publishers. And his mother, who was a tremendous eccentric by the name of Thelma, she went and bullied Walker Percy into getting it published. And it was a huge success. But then there was demand for more work from John Kennedy Toole, and there wasn't anything he could write because he was dead. And she found this novel he'd written when he was 16. And some people theorize he didn't actually write it, that she actually wrote it, passing it off as him at 16. But it's called The Neon Bible, and it's a very short book. It's a lovely little book. And it was made into a really beautiful film by Terence Davies, starring Jenna Rollins. And I said, Angela, you've got to take a look at that film. For one thing, the lighting in it is incredible, and the cinematography is really beautiful, and it provides a lot of visual inspiration for films. How many paintings have you made from the Neon Bible?
I think it's either 5 or 6. No, it's definitely 6. Most of them were singular shots, but this one, this particular scene, which is all of the men have left this southern town and they're off in the war. The abusive husband who's like, lost all of his agency as like a kid that grew up farming and no longer has land, or there's no longer the like crop share land because they're all supposed to be working in factories or coal mines at that point, and he's basically been kind of what's the word,
infantilized. Thank you, darling. He's sort of been demasculated by the version and the evolving capitalism that's happening at that moment, and so he is kind of awful and eventually gets drafted and goes off to the war, and does he come back? I can't remember now. And so the women are all left at home with the children, and so Jenna's character is the kind of spinster aunt. So she's a little bit older in the film than I think she looks here, but I couldn't quite get the age right, and I didn't think it was actually that important. It's some of the single portraits that I pulled that are more focused, but in particular on her, you get a sense that she's 50 or more in the frame, and Although as a goddess, she doesn't necessarily have age.
Yeah, she's
Who the
immortal,
fuck cares?
basically.
I mean, yeah, I will refrain from. I mean, because and I mean, and I think it's really interesting that, like, you know, I think like, and I think it's something that she always accomplished. She was always able to be this ravishing beauty that you would basically sell your soul to you know, hook up with. But but in the same light of that, I felt like, you know, it was impossible to objectify her as a sex object because she was just too great of an artist. It was like this thing where her agency was so strong that you could never actually fetishize her. She never fell into that, like, um, the way that like Hana Shagula did, but very purposefully manipulating that sense of like the catty look at the camera. Like Jenna never did that. Like she always was in control of the camera, which is just the most fascinating accomplishment from beginning to end of every one of her films, no matter how shitty they are. There's always this way in which she's without a doubt gloriously beautiful, and is somehow, and maybe it's that hardness that you're talking about, William, I don't know, somehow impossible to objectify in a sexual way. It's very strange, even in faces. But anyway, she's beautiful in this, and I was really interested in this scene because there are these kind of dudes that are past in a band that come along and sort of give her agency again after she's kind of just been flailing around in the town and being treated horribly because she wears clothes that somebody might wear in New York, and she espouses certain ideas, and there's definitely an allusion to maybe a lesbian affair in it, but then she hooks up with the bass player, and it's like she's clearly a person that is not burdened by the morals of the Southern Christian sect that is trying to, you know, put her in her place. And so this is the moment in the film where she actually is, and in the book as well, where she is actually able to find an operational space, to find some way in which she can actually be alive in the world in the way that she's actively doing something instead of just sitting around waiting to die, basically. It's kind of an intense scene. Yeah.
I was just looking at the clock, you guys. What do you say about taking it over to Q&A right now?
That sounds good. There's one request I have. I'd actually like to post the link to the campaign for my novel.
Yes.
I'm about to publish the second novel in the trilogy. I should have known better. And I have a fundraising campaign that is selling the book in advance of its publication, and it ends on February 26th. I think you may have to stop screen sharing in order for me to share that link, though, on the
Okay,
chat.
darling. Let me zoom in on Dolly and Lord Byron. Before you do that. Okay, here we go. Okay.
Yeah, that's another fall reference from an album called "Country on the Click" by the Fall. Oh, thank you so much, dear.
Lord Byron.
And "Country on the Click" is an album I found at a library bookstore, a library book sale in Ohio for 50 cents. And it was the best 50 cents I ever spent in my life. It's an absolute masterpiece of an album and fairly late in the Fall's career. So anyway, that, you know, a bit of shameless self-promotion. That is the link in the chat to the campaign for my novel, which is going on for another 12 days or so. And if you can support that, thank you.
The novel takes so much of the kind of like you were writing when we first met. You were writing "I'm open to anything," and you were just kind of embarking on that in a way, or you were embarking on the first revision, and then so much of the conversation that sparked these paintings. And clearly you can see that it's a very porous process in the sense I've contributed a lot of the input, a lot of myself into.
Well, not only that, but Angela, remember, I sent you the manuscript of the novel in progress, And
Mhm.
okay, so if you write a novel about artists, as this is a novel, it's about art school and artists, you have to make up fictional artworks uh,
Yes.
or describe artworks in the world. And I decided to make up fictional artworks painted by Frances, the character. And what did Angela do? She read the manuscript and she started making paintings based upon passages in the novel. The Wilhelm von Glüden painting, the yellow painting with the three figures, that's described in the novel. And now everyone's going to think I'm describing your paintings, but actually the description preceded the painting in real life.
That's right. And I was very clear in that. That was in the draft of the first PR. That was what happened.
True.
And we were trying to figure out how to get them, because in the novel, and I guess I wanted to do that just to emphasize how much I think that as painters, whether we're even, I mean, I think whether we're working within what we would call abstraction or non-representation, or to a certain extent, you know, some kind of figuration, I don't really see the binary. I think that binary is so infuriatingly stupid that that makes my hair fall out. But that we're constant, that like this embarking and a lifelong relationship with painting is always such that we are using our bodies and these histories are passing through us, and that all of these social relationships end up on the surface of those things that we make, whether we like it or not. And I'm sort of throwing that relationality into relief by overtly addressing that with and highlighting it and enjoying the friendship. I mean, it's so great that William isn't fucking, I mean, whatever. The furthest thing would be a Koch brother or something even maybe more tedious, like I don't know, I know who I'm thinking of. Who's the guy that's Gloria Vanderbilt's kid, who's the media guy? You know, the guy with the gray hair. Yes, Anderson Cooper. Like it's not like Anderson Cooper giving me a commission, right? This is the antithesis. But I do know he's a collector, right? And probably has a decent collection. So I wanted to really highlight that. And so when I read that segment in the book, I thought like, oh, like this is the operation, like the Generalins painting that William eventually saw in Brooklyn, that was one of the large Generalins that's in the Yossi Milo show, is described. And then he made up this other painting. And what would be ideal is to try to reenact that scene in the book in the next edition, which hopefully someday I'll be able to do. And so we couldn't figure out how to hang them across the room from each other in the installation at M&B, but it was my intention to do so, but if it was possible. Somebody wrote in the hello Matthew Swain, you refer to your painting as covers. Well, I think I've actually been talking about that all along to a certain extent. Like, I mean, eons ago, I would talk about it in relationship to whatever it would be, like Nina Simone translating, you know, Ain't Got No, or Tina Turner doing, I mean, yeah, there's Proud Mary, but any one of those, like, well, that's Sly and the Family song, right? Like this sense, and the thing about her doing the Sly and the Family song, Sly and the Family Stone song, is that she sings all of the genders in that song, which is so fabulous. And that way in which you see these artists like take this existing cultural object and run it through the pulse of their vernacular and their neuroses and their body and all the politics that is almost automatically by default alters that translation is to something like I'm really, really interested in. I mean, and again, I see that as something that is like part and parcel to making paintings now anyway. Like we're all doing that all the time. We're really way more like rock musicians than we often like to admit. You know, there's go please.
I think it's important to mention the fragment as well. And we can talk about one more series of paintings that is in the show, Sea Creature, Sex Creature,
Yeah.
And that was, one of the first songs we listened to together when we first met was Flaming Desire by Bill Nelson,
Mm-mm.
which is this amazing song that, I mean, really, it seems to come from nowhere. And it has a great line, sea creature, sex creature. And I
Sea
gave that to you as a
creature.
prompt. And
Mhm.
you made like 5 paintings out of it. But it's not a cover of, okay, 7, wow. So it's not a cover of the entire song. It's not an attempt to encapsulate the entire song in a painting. It's just one line from the song that has become a painting. And for me, that's a very important point to remember, that it's just a tiny bit of a pop song or a rock and roll song that triggers something really active in your imagination.
Mhm. Yeah, it's thrilling. I don't know what's going on. Um,
Any
yeah,
more?
it seems infinite. I felt like as I started riffing on that, I thought I could, I could have made an entire show based on that line. And again, it's like that because of the fragment, the associations, the random associations of what that could mean explode.
Yeah,
So
the
in
other
that
thing
sense,
I could say about music is that if it's really intensely fun to listen to, music seems to suggest a whole world. It's like a kind of oral landscape that you have in your head. And this is very much the drama of being a queer kid in the middle of nowhere. You have your headphones and you've got your music and you listen to something that really moves you or changes your life. But it's not necessarily the song as a whole. It may be some aspect of it that really hooks you, the way it sounds, a line from the song. It really it triggers something in you. And I like that association with the way you're making paintings.
mm. Well, and it's strange how, like, normally, language could really sort of shut down that visualization process, and the fragment, the single line, really kind of explodes it too. But
Although I have to say, dear, I don't know I don't know how anything could shut you down. I mean, part of the thrill of doing this collaboration, if that's what it is, I'm not sure what it is, folie à deux,
yeah,
whatever this is that we're engaged in, one of the fun parts is that you never stop painting. There's this, I give you what, 4 words from a song by Bill Nelson, and suddenly there are 7 paintings, which is, I mean, that's really wonderful, because I think not every painter can be that productive and that engaged.
yeah.
I mean, I agree. I feel like your work is it's incredible the generative possibilities from 4 words or an image that William provides, or just an idea. And I feel like the images are so multi-sensorial, they're so immersive. They combine the oral with, there's like blood, sweat, there's like fluids and everything in there too. Just my take
Oh,
on
and
it.
if I can say something vaguely theoretical, in a
Mm,
way, this is the opposite of classic modernism, because classic modernism was kind of a chess game, and your king would have fewer and fewer spaces to move around in as you were going towards checkmate.
mhm,
So and so did a blue painting. I can't do a blue painting. Oh, so and so did a painting on an oblong canvas of these dimensions. I can't do that. You tick off all the boxes what all the artists who before you have done, and you can't do that anymore. Oh, nobody's making that kind of painting any longer. And this is the pathos of
mhm,
of uh, standard issue modernism, that it's this
mhm,
kind of end game of limiting possibilities. And what we're interested in, and I would
mhm,
go as far as submit that this is a kind of Deleuzian idea, that this is
mhm,
Deleuze writing about art, that what we're interested in is producing something and opening up possibilities rather than foreclosing them.
mhm,
That it is about working through the body and making something happen, and not being this cerebral unfortunate who's thinking about conceptual art. And it's like, oh God, somebody's already done the chair. damn it, I can't do that anymore. And you know, this, we're not even paying attention to any of that. This is some other way of working. And yeah,
Yep.
I could name drop Deleuze as someone who's, you know, writing about how that is possible. Does that sound about right to you, Angela?
Oh yeah, I mean it's heaven to me, and you know, but I also want to say it's productive, but for what end we don't know, right? It is to a certain extent. It isn't productive in that sense that it's trying to foreclose anything either, or to a certain extent to try to, you know, I mean, it's like I don't think I would have produced. In other words, there's the sociality of it that I don't think I would have produced that many paintings on that theme just because, you know, somebody, you know, just because it seemed like I'd do a show on that theme. But there's something about the connection and the kinship. I don't want to use too many queertopic words because I know it annoys William, but but it is because it is definitely not utopic in any way, but that there's a kind of, you know, unverifiable reason why this stuff exists that has a potency between like those indoctrinated, or to a certain extent to those who maybe either get the references or understand that we still need to forge friendships that don't fulfill these ridiculous societal expectations of like success or agency or likes or space in the world. You know, the validation systems.
If I can mention something to do with the novel, you know, my publisher was a little bit scared at first because a lot of the novel's rather dark. It's very critical of the art world and very critical of art school as an institution, and talking about the poverty of certain rituals that are really not worth even observing anymore. And, you know, this was perceived as very dark. And I said in response, well, if there's a saving grace for the book, it's in friendship, that people can meet and form connections that nourish them and help them get through life, but also help them be productive, help them make the work that they should be making.
And I would just say that on that note too, is that, you know, although, and this is where I'm always like critical of, I don't know if I thought language, where I'm always very skeptical of, weary of the idea of the kind of American idea of an individual, of the individuation of the person in late capitalism. And I had to learn that lesson really hard and really young, coming out in the 80s in Kansas. There was a certain way that like whatever my individual person was, it did not align to the normative regime. And I was going to be a miserable, homeless, you know, unsuccessful mole on the face of society, which clearly has still happened, but no. And so at a certain point, like just from butting up against that other problem and that lack of kind of acceptance in the family structure, like it became a sense of like how would I define my individual agency in the world, or my way of being productive in the world. And it never aligned with the way that you know, a conventional Protestant Christian American capitalist way of thinking about that would be. And so in that way, I think, you know, there are a lot of artists that wouldn't want to be called, I mean, however tongue-in-cheek, a bottom. And to me, I'm like, I don't know who I am. Yeah, like half the time the world has been trying to shove its arm up my cunt and like tell me what to do. Like, at least let me choose the person I'd like to have do that in a way that, and then see where it goes. And oh, sorry, William, I know you probably don't want to fist any ladies, but anyway, and the and the and so
this is a theme of our friendship. Angela saying something and my mortification in response. That's part of the bargain. You know, I get to watch all these wonderful paintings being made, but at the same time, I experience mortification from time to time.
But William knows something. What I was really going to say, the real point I was getting to that, but I had to throw in some jokes, is that, and I've learned this through teaching in one of those places that I love, and also has, as we all know, I think there are even a couple of my students on this right now. Hi, people. There's a horrible financial ask in those places, and it's hard to say whether or not the returns are worth the investment. I know they are, because no returns are worth their investment in this society. So you at least might as well have a good conversation along the way. But there are ways in which William honed in on things that I was doing in my work that I was really not able to see. And I was also very, very attracted to that, like in the deep sense of a kind of desire for what he was seeing that I wanted to explore with my own body through making these paintings, because the insight that he brought to the fold, like, triggered me. I mean, or whatever. I mean, it provoked me to act in ways that every time, like there in particular, there's the I Ask for Consent painting, where I was getting to experience a kind of explicit relationship to a subject matter, or to a certain extent, two subjects I'd already explored, in ways that I couldn't have driven myself to that space. So allowing somebody to take over what they understand to be attributes of my imagination, my personality, my perversions, my neurosis, and drive me is very exciting. I mean, drive me like I don't know what, a motorcycle or a BMW, or maybe just like a little orange moped, like the moped I had when I was in junior high school going to basketball practice. I don't know.
And I gotta say, for my part, it's really fun to learn how to look at painting. I mean, I had a sense of how to look at painting before, but now when I was with you at Skowhegan, I was not only learning how to look at painting, I was learning how the painting was made. And that was very, very important for me.
Mm-hmm.
I live with a painter, a guy named Mark Flores. And so I've had 25 years of looking at his paintings. But this is a different kind of relationship. It's very, very active. I don't tell my boyfriend what to paint. On the other hand, I seem to have no shame about telling Angelo what to paint.
And you can see why I say yes now. Anyway, I know we had opened up the folds to questions.
If there are any more questions. Any more?
Are people stunned into silence?
I mean,
this has been amazing, guys, and so much fun. I think, anything else? Any other questions? I don't see any others. So let's end it right now here. And thank you, Angela. Thank you, William. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This has been so much fun. And that's it.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Bye.
Bye.